meeting if you. Oh, got it.
Set, ready to go.
All right, thanks, Chris. Okay, let's begin the meeting. The Lehigh County Authority Board of Directors, September 27th, 2021. We have members present in person here during the meeting, and we also have board members that are attending via Zoom. This meeting is being held in hybrid fashion, Zoom and in person. So let's begin with a roll call of board members that are present, followed by staff, and then anybody from the public.
Okay, great. We'll start with the board roll call. Brian Melville.
Present.
Scott Bieber.
Here.
Richard Bonner.
Here.
Norma Cusick.
Here.
Ted Lyons.
Here.
Kevin Baker. Linda Rosenfeld.
Here.
Jeff Morgan.
Here.
Amir Kamili.
Present.
All right, we have 8 board members present. We have our solicitor, Mike Ball from Kingsbury present. And staff, in addition to myself, Lisa Gross, we have Ed Klein, John Parsons, Chris Mon, Chuck Volk, Susan Sampson, Andrew Moore, Phil DePoe, Lisa Miller, Todd Marion. We also have Jason Peters on the call to present one of the topics for today's agenda. It looks like we also have Jennifer McKenna and Brian Chamberlain from the city of Allentown and Herb Higginbotham from HDR on the call. There's probably some other staff members who are attending to listen in on the meeting.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. We did get our packets electronically and in hard copy in advance of this meeting. Anybody not receive those minutes, those meeting notes and papers? All right, so everybody has. To review the agenda and the need for executive sessions. Any changes, additions, corrections to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda. I do have one very brief item under staff comments, and we have no executive sessions planned.
Okay. Okay. Now look at the September 13, 2021 board meeting minutes.
Yeah, I have a comment on the August 23rd meeting minutes. It said that the vote should be recorded as 7-0, not 6. Actually, it's the reverse of that. It should be recorded as 6, not 7. Make a motion with those changes to accept the minutes to the September 13th meeting.
Second.
All right. And where were we talking about? Which part of the voting of the approval of the minutes? Is that what you mean?
The approval of the minutes for
Okay.
August the 23rd. It says should be recorded as 7-0, not 6. It's actually the reverse of that. Should be recorded as 6, not 7.
So we should just leave it as recorded as 6-0. Okay.
Flip the two around. Yeah, we got it.
Okay. All right. Motion made and seconded by Linda. And any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Give you all more time for that. All right, thank you. Any public comments at this time on anything that is not on the agenda?
No, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, no, thank you, Brian.
Any, Brian, thank you. All right, we move to action discussion items. The first thing on the agenda is under finance and administration, preliminary 2022 budget reviews discussion.
Okay, so before we get started with the presentation, just want to remind the board that budget book has been, a preliminary budget book has been distributed by email. Paper copies for those of you who are in attendance today. Paper copies will be mailed to board members who are attending virtually. So you have it, and you also have it by email, and it's posted on our website.
It was emailed today that we got this packet.
It was emailed yesterday.
That's good, okay.
It was also emailed yesterday, was an electronic copy of today's presentation, as well as posted on our website. So with that,
All right,
we are going to present today our preliminary budget. And this is quite preliminary. We have all the numbers together and we have some comments to make and hopefully some points of feedback for you. But as the board is aware, we have a budget deadline of the end of October. So last meeting, we presented some general assumptions and discussion of drivers for the expenses in the budget. And then today we're going to look at what the numbers look like and get some feedback from you on that. And then we'll have 2 more meetings to discuss in more detail. So with that, I'm going to kick off with just what we're going to cover today. The budget assumptions are have not significantly changed except for staffing changes. So we'll talk about that in a minute. And then Ed's going to go through in as much detail as you might like the fund financials and the status of where we are with the budget right now. And then we'll talk about next steps. So the first item, it relates to COVID-19 impact on the 2022 budget. We reviewed this with you in some detail at the last meeting, and so there's no changes there. We just have it here to remind everyone what we talked about. So generally speaking, the major impact of the pandemic has been on collection of past due receivables from our customers. And for 2022, we're anticipating a return to basically normal collections status. At the last meeting, we also reviewed our draft strategic plan goals for 2022. I'm not going to go through these in detail. This is just a draft, and we'll be presenting our strategic plan to the board and the public in October or November. But in order to develop our budget for 2022, we took a look at what the draft goals are looking like in that plan and trying to incorporate those into our budget. So one thing I do want to mention relates to staffing. We had highlighted some items or marked with an asterisk last time that we believe require some staffing support in order for us to implement those strategic goals. And so for this round of proposed numbers for the budget, we've incorporated those staffing additions into the budget proposal. So what that looks like for staffing changes, this is new. We didn't talk about this last time. There are 3 positions that we've added into the 2022 budget that relate to strategic goals. And they're listed here: an employee development coordinator to help us focus on employee development, employee engagement related activities in our strategic plan, process improvement coordinator to help us further our process improvement goals, and then a position in asset management, which we currently do not have, but have been talking and working on various asset management related activities for many years. And then there are 2 other positions added to address other staffing changes, not so much tied to the strategic priorities. One is a GIS specialist that we talked about last time. And then we have 1 additional new position that is in place to help us with some succession planning needs and operational reorganization that's happening. Any discussion on this one?
Yeah, just the 2021 staffing requirements. Do we anticipate fulfilling those this year? And so that's not included in here?
Correct, right. So on the slide that's showing now, the middle column that says 2021 forecast, the 168 employees that are shown in that middle column include filling all of the positions that are included in the 2021 budget, which we're working on a couple of them now. Several of them we've already filled, but essentially getting to full staffing by the end of the year.
So can I just, so if you're adding costs for a process improvement, we have to have a number in mind that through the process improvement, we're going to get X dollar of savings. So you can justify adding a process improvement coordinator. Otherwise, just adding a person without recognizing, where that cost offset is coming from. At least in my mind, it doesn't make sense. Same thing for the asset management coordinator. Somebody has done the back of envelope calculation and say, okay, in asset management, what we are managing today, there is a lot of inefficiency that we think from the running that more efficient, you're going to get $200,000 saving. Therefore, you can justify having $100,000. So those are all improvements, efficiency work. So therefore, in order to add people, in my opinion, we have to justify and hold us accountable if we are adding costs, where we are reducing the cost to offset that addition.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. And how do you measure that? That increase in productivity that would justify the additional cost of an employee.
There might be some tangibles, but mostly a lot of intangibles. But it's a good idea to say these are the expectations of that person coming in, how it will affect our efficiency and improve our performance and our dollar savings. Always good to do that. Yes.
We can certainly develop that for next discussion. I don't know that we've done a robust cost benefit on these positions, but certainly there are efficiencies that we're planning to gain from having these positions. We can detail that for you.
We can do that for next. No, I think
That's fine.
let's do it for next meeting. That's fine. Yeah.
Hey, Lisa, it's Jeff. I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So as far as the two coordinators that we were just talking to, the process improvement and asset management, are those positions or tasks that could be done by a consultant and done in the short term, or it's something you definitely need a full-time employee for the long term to do?
Our feeling is that both of those positions at the coordinator level are long-term permanent positions. There's job tasks and functions that they're going to do on a continuous basis. You can always get an asset management consultant to help develop the program and implement a program, but you're still going to need staffing to implement and continue to monitor and track and implement the programs that result from that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was considered. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you still think that we would hire a consultant to look at our processing and identify what kind of improvements can be made where, so you could, unless you can bring somebody in that has those kinds of skill sets already that can run that kind of assessment. That's kind of a higher level than just somebody who's going to manage that. So
on the process improvement side, getting to Amir's question about the efficiencies and what we hope to gain from having this position, we've done an some internal assessment on process improvement opportunities. We currently have a list of 101 processes that we think could be improved and create some efficiencies. So we've been working through that, and we have Mark Bowen, who I believe many of you have met, has been working on some of them already. But I think from the standpoint of being able to illustrate and show the work that this person will do and the efficiencies that we'll get from that, we have the groundwork laid for that. And we've been doing that internal assessment over the past really 6 to 9 months.
Is anybody within your organization that has Six Sigma and Lean training and certifications? Because we can go to the process improvement and say, based in known methodology that a lot of companies use, yes, these are efficiency here and there, or you don't have such a person in your organizations.
Well, I know Chris Mon does, and Chris can speak for himself if he wants to share exactly what his qualifications are. We do have some other individuals who have some related background
Do we have anybody with a Six Sigma? or-
Chris, can you jump in, please, and just share your background?
Sure. I've gone through multiple green belts for Lean Sigma, multiple certifications that have had multiple projects completed and published through and gotten my cert. I do carry, I'm still a card carrying member of that group. I have a master's in business from DeSales as well.
Okay.
And I think I'm in a decent position to kind of at least oversee that type of activity internally.
Anybody else besides you, Chris?
I know we have several people that have gone through master's programs on the call today. Actually, some are in business, some are in more of a Master of Science. But I do know that we have multiple people who have gone through the process of getting an education related to process improvement through business application.
Okay, so somebody has MBA, counting them as have Six Sigma or Lean.
Not necessarily Six Sigma. I know that's a completely separate process all into itself. But I think the whole process improvement, and you'd be hard to find a master's program nowadays that doesn't at least touch on the process or cover it in a class. Maybe not necessarily going for the certification, but you'll absolutely be familiar with the processes. And depending on how you want it to manage it internally, whether it's through PMBOK or any of the other kind of standard project management paths, there's more than a couple people internally that I have confidence could certainly
Okay.
support.
I do have some certification in Lean. And Lean certification a couple of years ago, went through a number of Kaizen events myself. But I can tell you, I did not go the next step into Six Sigma.
Yeah,
It was at the Lean.
I'm just trying to see who has practiced that, so somebody would lead. If you select the project, somebody has to lead it, right? It's more about the education, it's more about the application.
So this position also would fall under Chris's purview, so him having that certification is a good fit.
While we're having a nice discussion between different parts of the room here, I want to make sure that the audience is able to hear everybody, that our microphones are placed properly. Is anybody having any difficulty understanding what people are saying?
It's okay, Brian. What was happening, there was multiple people speaking at once, so I was having a hard time deciphering back and forth between Lisa and Amir. But it's okay as long as one person at a time is speaking, it's fine.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Okay. Anybody else, any problems?
Yeah, Ted here, I have a question. It would be helpful to me, who's an old guy, to have an example of the type of work these various new hires would be doing. I mean, a concrete example. Coming to work on a Monday morning, and what are you going to do?
Okay, sure. So the employee development coordinator, these are just draft titles, they're not necessarily what the titles will be, but the employee development coordinator would be working on employee relations with our unions, and also developing training programs for supervisors. That's one area that's within our strategic planning goals. So supervisory onboarding, supervisory training on policies that we have, drug and alcohol training, those kinds of things. And then also working on developing the technical training requirements for our various technical and administrative positions, so that we have job-specific training plans for the various positions that we have in the organization. We currently don't have anything like that. So those are just some of the top level kinds of things that person would be working on. The process improvement coordinator really would be working through Chris on the list of 101 process improvements that we've already identified, but also working with the whole organization on identifying additional process improvements and prioritization. And then from there, working with teams who are focused on whatever that particular process is that they're trying to work on. So for example, we have one big item on the process improvement list relating to our signatory sewer billing process and how the data is managed and how that functions within the organization. So this person would be working with the various people who do that function and creating efficiencies there. The asset management coordinator is one that we need to have probably a little more definition to, but essentially what we have now is the asset management program is partially being worked through our IT group in our maintenance management program and our GIS, but then also the master planning work that Phil DePoe is doing, and the capital planning work that Chuck Volk is doing, and then the ongoing operation of the assets that John is doing. So all of those pieces sort of make up the various components of an asset management program, and the coordinator would be working with all of those stakeholders to standardize and develop how LCA wants to manage its assets moving forward. That's kind of the high level description of each of those positions. Ted, I don't know if that helps you to understand.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
So on this page, we've already looked at it, but essentially it looks at the various departments within the organization and where the staff additions would fit. So 2021, we have a total of 168 employees budgeted, and for 2022, we have 173. That's a total staff addition of 5. Other budget assumptions for 2022, we reviewed these at the last meeting, so I won't go into them in detail, but of course, part of the budget process, we include cost increases for salaries, insurance, and inflation. And from there, we'll move into the numbers. Ed, you want to jump in with
Yes.
internal service?
So we're going to take a look first at internal service, and I'm going to make a general statement that said, given the nature of the things that we had to do with respect to COVID-19, both a year ago and this year, a lot of things that we wanted to do, we didn't get the opportunity to do. A lot of programs that we thought would be able to take place have been somewhat curtailed, delayed, or just slowed down generally. So I was, in my mind, very sure that I didn't want to start comparing all of our budget numbers to just a forecast number that was more than likely, in all cases, was lower than what the budget was. So I thought the only fair and logical way to do this was to say, let's take our budget comparison against 2021 budget coming in, adjusted for obviously some of the things that we are curtailed with that we don't have control over, such as inflation and stuff. So this is a comparison of 2022 budgeted internal services against 2021 budget internal services, and as we've already seen with respect to the headcount numbers, with the headcount going up, and the fact that we had a large number of positions unfilled that are going to get filled during the year, but not on the books for the entire year. You can see, not surprisingly, that the personnel costs are going to be up about $391,000 on a rounded basis, attributable to the reorganization and headcount changes that we've talked about. As you start to go down the list of other expenses, I mean, the big one that stands out is insurance and risk management. We are now faced with a very significant increase in property insurance. Some of the assets have been reappraised. We sourced this out, and there was a number of people that would were not even interested in our business because they knew they wouldn't even be close to us. So we stayed with the current carrier, and that is going to result in a $213,000 increase. A couple other things along the way with respect to Chris and his desire to upgrade some of the computer hardware and software.
Jesus Christ.
Ted, you're on, you should probably mute yourself.
Whoever that was.
Okay. But that's, I mean, as you look across all the categories there, there's just that really one big number stands out. I mean, and that's almost that's 213 of the 298, a couple other things, credit card fees, et cetera, that are going to go up. So that's what internal services looks like. $690 or $689,000 difference attributable mostly to the headcount and insurance.
So those personnel costs includes pension, insurance, everything?
It's fully loaded in.
Fully loaded. So if you have 100 people in the organization, correct? Approximately?
168.
So 168. So the cost per person would be per FTE. So if you have a cost of personnel of $3.6 million for 150.
Hmm? Yeah.
Fully loaded FTEs.
Fully loaded, yeah, that includes all of our, I'll call perks,
Okay.
vacation, stuff like that.
Okay.
I have a question on the insurance and risk management. Is that a direct result of direct result of the issues that we've faced this year, the pipe breakages?
Actually, Brian, no. This is generally speaking, the industry has gone up significantly. There's quite a bit of inflation in across insurance carriers. The reappraisal of the values of the city over a period of time. I mean, certainly you get dinged a little bit for that. Well, we're not paying a significant premium increase because of that.
So basically, there's nothing we could have done to.
I think we did the only thing that we could logically do, and that was source it out to see if there's somebody that's going to be more competitive. And to be honest with you, I was really shocked that, like I said, 4 or 5 of them didn't even want to buzz.
My numbers doesn't match up, so so we have 150 people, and you give them $200,000 per head, all costs included. That would be $3 million.
Would be with the number that you 200,000 a head.
200,000 times 150 is about
30 million. Yeah.
This is, you have personnel costs, $3 million.
Keep in mind, we're only looking at just the internal service budget. So I misled you if I said all 100.
You have salary and wages, overtime, insurance,
yes.
Pension. So my number shows 20,000. I know you guys make more than 20,000.
But it wouldn't be across all 168 people. This would be only the people that are flowing through the internal service buckets, which would be a fraction of it.
I mean, this is one bucket of several, not the entire.
This is not the entire business.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I asked the question, you told me 150 people. So, okay, my
mistake.
My bad. Okay.
I'm looking at total headcount, and quite frankly, we're talking about a fund that has only a fraction of the people that would be affected.
If I could just interject as well, in the book, if you're following along in the book, the internal services description and these numbers in a little different detail are shown on pages 25 and 26. So you can see, Amir, the various functions that fall within internal services relate to things like human resources, finance, risk management, the operational budgets we're going to get into next.
Okay. Thank you.
My mistake.
So how many people are in the internal service?
You would be talking about the executive group, you would be talking about HR, you would be talking about accounting and finance, you would talk about customer service. So we're talking about 40 people.
ballpark. That's good. All right. So 40 out of 168.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So this would be the budget for the administration group, the internal services group. And altogether, you're budgeting $1.1 million in total. And biggest portion of that is going to be SCADA, $750,000 related to, let's say, the suburban water sites. Chris, tell me if I'm right.
That is correct.
So that's where the biggest amount of money is going, is to actually start to tie down water systems in on a computerized basis. And so $1.1 million budgeted for 2022. I think we had gone all through this, and I think just talking about what we did, we covered all of these items. So now this is what the funds look like. Very similar to what you see on a monthly basis. So if you just kind of go across the top there on a net income basis, we've got suburban water, wastewater, and city are all going to be on the positive side. That's worth a little bit more than $5 million. That compares to, and I'm looking at this going, wow, it's nice to see all that positive net income figures. We don't always see that. That compares to a positive number for forecast of $3.6 million, and also better than budget. So it's good to see positive numbers for net income across all three funds. Just going down, and we have more details on this, so we'll talk about some of the details as we get through the funds. Cash flows, again, all three funds looking on the good side with respect to being positive. So we're at a surplus, almost $9.5 million. As we compare it to forecast, the total $5.7 million. You have one fund up there, suburban water, that is on the negative side, and then suburban wastewater and city are on the positive side. But again, it's a budget of 3.5 goes to 5.7, then up to 9.5, and that compares to a negative number in 2020 on the total basis. Debt service coverage ratios, given that 1.20 internal target for indenture, across the board 2.01 versus 10 and 1.85, doing well compared to 2021. Up on water, wastewater's down, and city division, but still good numbers and better than budget in all three cases as well. So that's good. Capital spending, we have some more details on that, but altogether almost $20 million capital spending, 5.5 on water, 2.9 on wastewater, and 11 in the city. That compares to 15.7 in total, and actually a little bit better than what we budgeted for 2021 as well at 16.7. So we'll take a look at suburban water now. We expect that we're budgeting that we're going to have $402,000 of net cash flow. That will be coming from almost $16.3 million in operating revenues against $10 million in operating expenses. Not much in the way of non-operating revenues, just some interest income, and rates have really not gotten any better over the years. We'll see where that goes when economic activity changes with respect to inflation and Fed moves, but for right now, we're on the conservative side. So altogether, we're getting $6.3 million of money in cash available for debt service. Our debt service after, and this is after post refinancing, is now 3.125, and we're going to have some, I'll call it negative movement in working capital with respect to increases in accruals on a non-cash basis. So altogether, we're gonna have $2.8 million available for capital. That will be against $5.5 million of capital spending. So you can see we're gonna need to borrow $3 million, 3,075, to make this happen. This is the expense review, kind of trying to attribute major factors to the change in total spending. Again, compared to 2021 budget, one at the very bottom, and that's kind of what you see, that total operating expenses are up by $1.8 million, which $260,000 is related to inflation. That leaves a net change on the volume side of $378,000. And this year we have about, we have some money that we're taking off the capital books that truly isn't capital, doesn't belong in capital, putting it in operating expenses where it belongs. And that's worth $405,000. So that's a new thing for this fund in terms of operating expenses. And as we talked about during the last meeting, we have $754,000 of additional purchased water costs attributable to a little bit higher volume and the increase in capital on the city side. Now, just getting down to the bottom again, it says $378,000 in, I'll call it volume spending or real spending, but in that number, there's variance related to depreciation that they can't control of $373,000. So actually, when you adjust for that, your comparative spending on a real dollar basis is only $5,000 higher than budget. Okay. Suburban water capital, $4.4 million rounded. Some of the 1.1 administration's going to fit in here and raise that up, and we have it budgeted that we've got all of it. We'll take a look at that again. But Chuck, if you want to talk about some of the things that are going to go on in suburban water capital.
Sure, Ed. The largest single project is a resumption of the annual water main replacement projects. We took a 2-year pause on that due to budget limitations, and we are resuming that program next year in suburban. And then we have the Arcadia water tank replacement for our system out in the Smithville area. We are replacing the steel bolted tank with a concrete tank, and that $400,000 that's just to finish construction in the spring of next year. That project is under construction right now. And then we are doing a water meter replacement program for some commercial meters, 1.5 and 2-inch commercial meters, $450,000 worth of water meter replacement. And then we have our design phase of our upper system pump station out in the Folesville area, at the bottom project there. So those are the highlights of what we're doing next year.
So I've already covered the operating expense stuff. Again, with, due to inflation, spending variance, etc. And once you adjust for depreciation, I got very comfortable with that. There wasn't a big increase at all. There was hardly any increase at all on operating expenses compared to 2021. So now you get into the rate considerations that we need to pay attention to. As I said, $3,075,000 in debt was going to be required to handle the capital improvements, given that I think it was a $2.4 million pay bill required. Now, the one advantage that we get is, debt service in 2021 is going to be a little bit better than it would have been. And the other consideration is how much growth are we we going to consider on a percentage basis? So at this point in time, this preliminary budget includes a revenue growth of 24%. And it's going to have to be some combination of volume sales growth and rate increases. And we'll let you go right on to the next page. This was how we arrived at the revenue required. Instead of relying on just cash flow and kind of back, and then I said, so let's take the way that it should be done, and let's take the $10 million of ex-D&A operating expenses. You're going to get $50,000 of interest income, so that's going to cover some of it. So take that out of the picture. You're going to get almost $1 million worth of system and connection revenues, and so again, $967,000 of total revenue is already required. The debt service of 3.1, new debt based on the $3 million and $75,000 of new borrowing would be about $92,000. You got to add in the fact that we got to at least cover 1.2, so that 20% is $644,000. And as I mentioned, $2,413,000 worth of pay-go CapEx required, meaning that we really needed to get to $15.3 million of revenue. Comparing that to what we were at in 2021 of 12.4, meant 23.93% increase in revenue requirements, working toward that magic number.
So that's the increase 23% is the rate increase, is that okay?
I would say that's the revenue increase required. How much do you want to consider of that requirement covered by volume? Which we have not decided what that volume number is. And the difference would be, so if you said volumes 1%, you would need 23. If you said volumes were 2%, and we have to look at that, then rates would be 22. Just backing into the.
So maybe a few months ago or 5 or 6 months ago, we were discussing a rate increase for suburban, and then the number that time we were thinking about it was at low double digit. Is that correct?
We had gone in, I think in the previous cap plan with 6.75%, and that was with a substantial amount of borrowing. However, what threw that out of kilter was the change in the water purchase costs, and that pretty much added almost 7 or 6.7% rate requirement just to cover that this year.
So do you predict that that 20%, above 20% profit increase is going to be continual or just a 1 year?
I could certainly, in my mind, say I don't think we would need 24%, but I got to be honest with you. I think we need to do a little bit of projection on this over a couple of years before I say that I know what that number is going to be. So.
Because we know our capital expenditure for the next 2 years. Correct. Right. A majority of this cost is capital, right? If I'm not mistaken. So we should be able to project what revenue we're projecting and what capital. I'm just concerned, do we need to increase the rate by 20% in the next 2 years?
Fair question, and like I said, I think the only way to really get at that, so I can answer that truthfully, is to take the capital plan that we did and now factor in the additional cost of water as part of the operating expenses and see where that takes us over the next 5 years, so that we can answer that.
Thank you.
If I could add to that also on the water rate increases, what we saw between 2020 and 2021 was a big jump in the cost. And primarily the driver for that is because we had additional rate revenue in the city division, we were able to start working on capital improvements at the water plant. So with those ramping up, that's reflected in the rate. So as we do the rate analysis, we also need to consider the city division and what capital is happening at the water plant.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's sort of good news, bad news. Good news is we get to do more. Bad news is guess who's paying for it.
That was what I'm trying to get. Thank you. I mean, I'm just trying to,
Yeah, we need to, I won't be comfortable answering that without taking that capital plan that we just did back in February and March and saying, so if I now got an idea of what the cost of water purchases is, and I factor that increase, where does that take us to over a period of time? And, you know, it's 24%, kind of make that level out to something a lot less than that. That's where we need to go next.
Ed, with the operating expenses, am I wrong, but that, once you bump the rates up, you don't have that showing up every year anymore, do you? The $10,064,000. Is that due to the purchase of the water? The rates go up?
No, you shouldn't see 24% increase in operating expenses. No. Yeah, you're right. That $10 million sort of levels out. I think, depending on what capital goes in the city. So.
Right.
I think the other driver too, we've been challenged with over the past few years is how much of our capital program do we want to build into the rates versus how much do we want to borrow for. So I think this is the first time we're showing a rate increase that is really focused on doing a pretty high percentage of capital improvements through PAYGO. So once we get our rates to a level where they can cover more of the capital improvements on a PAYGO basis, then we'll be at a point where the rates can sustain that. But we're clearly not there yet.
Yeah, if you kind of want to do a simple math on it, I mean, depreciation will be in the neighborhood of like $4 million. So we're covering, I'm hoping at least about 50% of that in the number. So
yeah, I'm not. I mean, that's the calculation absolutely right on. I'm just in my head as a ratepayer. You look at the other end, suddenly they are being told that in the next 4 years, every year you get 20% increase. And I think one of the roles that we have as a board is continuously to look at the PR of avenues how we can manage those numbers better. Are there efficiency or other things that we can do? So that's my point. 20% increase is a lot for some people it's a lot. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Excuse me, Ted here, question. Can we go back a slide? Yeah, looking at the debt service, existing debt, $3,125,000. So it's going to be an increase in the debt service to existing debt of $3 million.
no, that is the debt service.
That is the debt service we're already paying.
Yes.
So why is that part of it?
Go ahead.
So why is that part of an increase?
Well, you have to cover the debt service. All I'm trying to do with this calculation is saying if I have these parameters, existing debt service, operating expenses, well, how much money do we need to pay for it all and say we break even? That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's all we're trying to do.
So what we're showing here is a total requirement for revenues of 15.3, but our current rates will only give us 12.3.
Got it.
The difference is what makes up 23.9%.
Yeah.
On the next slide, it shows you the dollars a different way. So the revenue increase that we're looking for is about 2.9, almost $3 million. You want me to do this slide, or you want to do it?
You want to? Go ahead.
So
you put it together. So
this is a team effort here for sure on rates and the budget. So the suburban water rate discussion, we wanted to share the information with you and get feedback if you have any on what this looks like. So for a revenue increase of about $2.9 million, that's just rounded to 24%. Again, as Ed mentioned, large portion of that relates to the capital funding of $2.4 million. 82% of the rate increase or the revenue increase is related to capital funding. So I wanted to put it out there as a discussion item if that's the direction that we want to continue to try to achieve with our rates. And also recognizing that doesn't fully cover the CapEx and that borrowing is still required, the $3 million or so that it has mentioned we'll need to borrow. So that's one point of discussion I think the board could have about rates. And then just to give you a little flavor of what it could mean or what it could look like, I'm showing the volume growth over a 5-year period from 2017 to 2021. The volume sales in terms of the water that we've sold has increased by about 12% over that time period, or average growth of about 3%. The customer bills issued is really just like a pure customer growth number. So we've had average customer growth of about 1%. So we have growth of new customers, but the volume sales is increasing by a higher percentage because some of those customers are large customers, like large industrial customers. So I think the rate calculation that we're going to work on will assume growth in general, somewhere between 1% and 3% to reflect this. And we just need to refine that number and what that looks like. If we just take the $2.9 million and spread it out evenly across all customers, that impacts an average residential customer by about $11.50 per month. It's not saying that's a proposal in any way. It's just kind of to give you an idea of what the impact could be for a residential customer. Wanted to kind of pause and give you that information and see if there's any direction that the board would like us to think about as we put the rate proposal together for the next meeting.
So the large customers, they have a fixed contract for so many years, correct? So we cannot increase their rate.
No, all of our customers on the water side are at will. So they pay the rate according to the rate schedule, and if we increase it, they pay the increased rate schedule. There's no guarantee for them to stay here, but there's no contract period or extension provisions.
Because the reason I'm asking that question, you have estimated residential rate impact. We did not talk about the commercial.
Right. Yeah, so normally when we're presenting rates, we do the rate comparison across the Lehigh Valley or across other utilities for the average residential customer, but we certainly have that information for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what's the current residential rate
The current residential rate per
that you're
month?
comparing this?
Yes. Shoot. It's someone help me with the math. 52 divided by 3.
15. No, 67.
About $16 a month.
16 odd, so 1667.
Customers are paying about $52 to $53 a quarter for water service. So it's.
Let me go up to 90. That's a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah.
$90.
I know.
$90
I know it's
a quarter is
disgusting.
not a lot.
It's
a lot of
big
increase.
increase.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
It's a lot of increase, but a significant increase is very little. It's still very little.
Yeah. And again, this is not an actual rate proposal. All I did was take the $2.9 million and spread it evenly across all customers. So we would do an actual rate calculation to come up with what the rate looks like if we're going to build the entire $2.9 million into it.
Ted here with a comment.
Yes.
This goes back to the philosophy of how much do you pay for out of your current earnings and how much do you borrow and pay off in the future, and how do you push your arms through that and define and explain it to a customer. Now it seems to me that the increase due to the fact we're paying more from water from Allentown, that's a fact of life that we got. You got it in the cheap for many years, and now you got to pay the full price. Then the question becomes how much of capital expenditures do you borrow or how much do you pay for out of current cash flow? And I don't know where we are philosophically on that, but that's probably part of this conversation.
So one of the things we've talked about, and I'm not sure if Kevin is on the call again, but I know he had talked with us about it as well, is about looking at your CapEx in terms of annual projects that you're going to do that relate to maintenance and rehab as being ongoing things that your rates should cover. And then things that are more speculative or drive growth, like for example, the upper system pump station project that we talked about, that should be potentially something that we borrow for and look for capital contributions from our developers for. So we can look at the capital plan from that lens, and I think we have. But the vast majority of our capital improvements now, because of the age of our system, are becoming more repeatable repair and replace type of projects that we're going to have every single year.
It would be helpful to have those numbers because when I bump into someone in Costco, they want to know why they're paying more. It would be nice to have a very simple back of the envelope explanation, very simple but accurate.
And if we go just back a couple of slides, we can do that breakdown more detailed for you, Ted. But looking at the capital budget for 2022, if we look at the list of projects that we have on tap, the vast majority of them are repair and replace type projects, and the $2.4 million for main replacement makes up more than half the budget. So that's something that we really need to be doing annually. There's just a small number of them that might be related to growth or business development, like the well improvements and capacity and the upper system pump station.
Yeah.
Okay. So our next step on the rates is to take the $2.9 million in revenue increase that we're looking for and run it through some models that we have to develop a rate structure, a rate proposal. And we'll go through that at the next meeting, unless there's any particular feedback from today from the board that we should consider change anything that we're doing with this at this point.
I think it would be very useful that we have the projections to see at least level of rate increase. It says 2 years or 3 years. So, building on what Ted said, if somebody asks you, is this is a 5 years time, 10 years, or 3 years, when do we reach to the point that we can get back to the 10% or 7% increase?
I think we can do that with what we have today, and then for this year's process, one thing we didn't mention is that during the calendar year 2022, we will be doing a full 5-year rate study with our consultant to help us look at it a little more comprehensively in terms of cost of service by customer class, which is a tool that we don't currently do in-house. Mm-hmm.
Another comment from Ted on this. In most situations when people pay for things, they have a choice. If you don't like X, you buy Y. If you don't like Y, buy Z. In this case, we're a monopoly. If you don't like water and sewer, then too bad. And so we have to be able to explain when we do have rate increases that people fully understand why they must pay more because they have no option. They can't take their business elsewhere. So it behooves us to have a full, comprehensive, and to Amir's point, maybe extrapolating out the curve a little bit, saying this is what things look like, and this is where it's going, and this is why it's going there. So people understand that we're not just being frivolous and really not have their best interest at heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Okay. Anything more on suburban water and this rate approach? All right, we'll move into the easier ones.
Okay, suburban wastewater. We are budgeting almost $3.9 million surplus cash flow. That will be coming from revenues of $28.6 million against operating expenses of $13.2. Again, not much in the way of interest income, so we're staying conservative. So that should leave us with $7.4 million of money available for a very low debt service of $736,000. So once you get there, we're at $6.7 million of money available for capital spending. At this point in time, we have $2,870,000 budgeted. Chuck will go through the list when we get to that. So there's the $3.8 million of surplus. Operating ratio with depreciation in is 1.07. That's good. That service coverage ratio of 10.11 against very, I'll call it very low debt service comparable. Capital coverage ratio of 2.34. Our cash on hand is going to be 423 plus days, and we have $6.4 million worth of investment balances projected for the budget. We're looking at the same way at the operating expenses as compared to the 2021 budget. Total operating expenses will be off, or I'll call it higher, by $333,000. $339,000 of that is attributable to inflation, but essentially leaves a positive spending, meaning we're spending less of $222,000. And in this particular fund, the operating, I'll call it the capital items that really need to be in operations are $216,000. That's a good favorable, I'll call it real spending volume variance. Actually, if you start to take a look at some of the other factors, depreciation and amortization is $1.4 million. And again, going back to the operating capital items that are now in operations, $1 million unfavorable. So $602,000 of favorable spending variance against this fund in terms of operating expenses.
Ted here with a question comment. If you could go back one slide again, please. When we look at these numbers here, these are cash flows.
Mm-hmm.
And they do not include depreciation.
No.
If you included depreciation, this is a comment, you would be building cash, which would allow you to pay out of your own pocket as opposed to borrowing. Am I correct in that?
If you build it into
if you had a depreciation as an expense item, your cash flows, your bottom line would be more negative.
Correct. If you're looking
not
at
on a cat.
You're correct. On a cash flow basis, it wouldn't change. On an income basis, it would go down as a result of including depreciation.
Yeah, but if you charge people for the expense of depreciation, you would build cash.
That is a fair statement.
And you'd be able to fund more of your own capital expenses from current funds.
If I could just interject on the suburban wastewater side, just to be clear, the suburban wastewater revenues are almost exclusively made up of signatory revenues by contract.
You're right.
So depreciation can't be included in
Gotcha.
what we charge there. But your comment is perfectly valid for the suburban water side. where we
Yes.
do have that flexibility.
Yes, and that was kind of reverting back to something I was trying to say, probably didn't say it the right way. But if I look at capital spending sometimes, I look at replacement ratio, which is nothing more than depreciation expense. And if you said on a general basis that you're going to include in your rate the depreciation so that you have a 1-to-1 replacement ratio, then you're capturing.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's where I was going. Yeah, it's just something to think about.
Absolutely.
And could you go back to the major maintenance and explain the $1 million?
In suburban wastewater land, we were capitalizing a lot of things called planning expense, modeling expense, etc., that we thought would be expensible. And as a result of the fact that we are creating a long-term model that is going to be used for identifying future improvements and essentially become a long-term asset, we no longer need to expense that.
So the money you pay for the model, you're not going to be as a capital cost, but basically as expense of the operation.
It's going to be in the capital cost,
In the capital.
not in the operating expense side, where at one time it was. So we're going to amortize it. It'll be more in depreciation.
So it's a positive number here. I got confused about this. That's why I asked. It's a
Because
positive.
I'm taking it out.
It's a positive number because we're taking it out.
Right.
So it's a reduction of our.
So just looking at it, you can say we had in 2021 budget $1 million of that we thought was going to take place in 2022 at zero. Okay. Chuck, you might.
This is Jeff. I just had a question. Can you go back one more slide?
This one?
Yeah. So looking at the bottom there, that the suburban wastewater has the $6 million in the bank, basically.
Yes.
So I know I asked this before and maybe, but it just seems to me, I don't really understand why, like you couldn't charge 1% interest and lend the money to suburban water. They get a low interest rate more than if you borrowed, did a bond issue. And on the other side, then suburban wastewater gets some money back into the fund and everybody wins. And maybe legally we can't do it, but it just seems practically cuts out the bank, it cuts out all of those extra costs and everybody would make out.
So Jeff, I would love to be able to say if we were truly an LCA business that we call the LCA, and without all the individual indentures, would love to be able to do that like a large corporation would. However, given the indentures and the segregation of revenues as different collateral for the borrowing, we cannot really physically do that unless we win way out of the realm of the language of the indenture.
Okay, I just wanted to bring it up again just to see if there was any possibility. So thank you.
Yeah, I hear you, and I sit here sometimes going, wow, without all the individual indentures, this would be a whole lot easier. But
I think the other aspect to that is that the reserves that we're showing here, they're not huge, but what we have in front of us on the wastewater side is enormous. The last meeting, Phil DePoe presented a pretty good idea of the 537 costs, the planning costs that are going to be coming at us. So we're trying to build reserves so we can reduce some of the future borrowing for some of those projects.
yes, and given what we're doing with 537 and before all the good stuff kicks in, really, we're able to not even have to worry about borrowing.
Just trying to be proactive in response by customers. Customers look at it and say, well, almost all of our residential customers use water and sewer. So increases in water costs, if we would reduce our sewer costs, then it wouldn't be so bad. But because of the reserves needed, we have to put out the story out there about why those reserves are being managed and trying to be sustained. Otherwise, people would say, well, why don't you just give me a break over here if you have to increase it? They're just being proactive in our communication.
Keeping in mind as well, we don't charge the sewer directly, so the municipalities would have to be on board with reducing their revenue, which
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, that too.
might not happen. Chuck.
Okay, suburban wastewater. The biggest bucket of money there, you can see is retreatment plant improvements. That's annual capital improvements to that aging facility. We haven't changed that amount for the past 5 years or so. We have no problem spending that money over there, just trying to keep everything operating and stay in compliance. So that's basically a constant. Another big bucket of money is planning efforts related to Western Lehigh Interceptor, as Liesl and Ed have touched on. That cost is going to increase significantly as these plans yield likely capital improvement projects. So you can see the spending in those categories for planning for Central Lehigh and for the signatory I&I and Chestertown area capacity solution. Moving down to our satellite systems, we have our plant at Heidelberg Heights, which is from the late 70s. That's in need of some improvements. So there's $300,000 earmarked there for 2022 to add a screen, an automatic screen to the headworks of that facility and alleviate some downstream clogging problems that we have. And then also our annual I&I and our pipe replacement project up there at Heidelberg Heights, which I'm going to be talking about later. So that's $300,000, and that's to remain in compliance with our consent order. And eventually that will be coming to a close because we will have replaced all the original vitrified clay pipe up there. Then at the bottom, the big cost there, Park Pump Station rehab. That's phase 2 of the upgrade. That consists of replacing the old generator out there. So that $400,000, that's to finish design, permitting, bidding, and start construction in 2022. So that all totals $2.87 million for next year.
You know, I have this question makes sense from what Phil presented one of the options for the pre-treatment a couple of years ago. Is there any capital improvement that we're doing today that we can do things that it would reduce the cost, or Phil is going to be doing 3 years down the road? I don't have a good vision of plan, but I'm just asking that question to see how you're thinking that way.
Yeah, actually, we're looking at the problematic cryogenic facility up there and looking at long-term solutions to replace
what cryogenic?
the cryogenic facility at the pretreatment plant, the oxygen plant.
The oxygen plant.
That plant is getting old. It's costing more and more money to maintain it every year. With an eye on the future, we're looking at options for replacing that with a newer technology. So that's something that could offset, because that plant is going to be needed regardless of what happens to that plant. Master plan terms. So we're definitely going to look at options to replace that. That's the heart of the plant, the biological treatment system. That's why we get away with a smaller footprint than we normally would need to have using the pure oxygen. So yeah, we are thinking about that.
Hey, Chuck or Ed, I had a question, just a general question about the pretreatment plant. I know they accept a lot of hauled waste there, and I would assume that revenue helps to offset some of these costs at the plant, in addition to the other pretreatment waste that we get from the industrial customers there.
Yes.
is that shown somewhere? Is that broken out, or is revenue from the pretreatment plant just like one particular line item somewhere?
Well, in the budget that you're looking at now, it's just built into the total operating revenues. If memory serves me well, that is a separate line item on what some of the system.
Yeah, actually, Jeff, in the booklet that I sent you, on page 20, it shows the system by system breakdown for suburban wastewater, and it's showing user charges for the hauler program at almost $2.8 million,
Yeah.
separate from the other charges.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'll look at that. I have the file online. I wasn't looking at it now. I was watching the slides. So,
Okay.
all right, that's cool. I thought it was a fair amount, and I think it's a good program and a revenue stream. So, thank you.
Are we continuing to get new customers on the hauler thing?
Yeah, there's new customers that come in every quarter.
I imagine we're about the only plant around that's accepting new customers.
Yeah, Exeter doesn't accept anymore. Our closest big competition is actually Delcora down in Chester. And they take almost everything down there. But we do have a robust program out there, and our contract operator does a good job of getting new customers.
Good.
Okay, user revenues from the city. Oh, okay, we already talked about this. This is basically, we're tied into the signatories they get for operating expenses, whatever debt service. So then the revenue basis is that. I think we talked about the operating expenses in terms of real volume spending being favorable. We're not borrowing in 2022. At this point in time, we're still pending what goes on in Trexler Town Intercepted Project, another 537 work. And one of the things that we will need to take a look at is what's going on with, I'll call cash flows in the common rate collector system. And I think the next thing would be at the next meeting is a user charge report. The city. Okay. At this point in time, we're budgeted for $5.3 million of cash surplus. Operating revenues at almost $50.8 million. Operating expenses 25.3. A little bit better amount than the other two funds in terms of interest income. But we have a large, I'll call it large, reserve balance required, so that helps, although interest rates won't. Annual payments, $1.2 million, and so that we should have about $24.4 million available for the debt service. Debt service is going to be 15.5 in terms of principal and interest payments out the door. We will have a positive working capital effect coming from, I'll call it reductions in working capital as some of the receivables and activity normalizes out, and also some non-cash expenses that will actually allow us to have some cash. So we should have $11.1 million cash available for capital spending. We do plan to borrow $1.2 million from Penvast. This is, I'll call it an extension of what we thought we were going to do this year in terms of the BFD project, actually playing out in 2022 instead, because of some nuances with borrowing requirements, collateral requirements. Capital spending will be a little bit more than $7 million, so altogether $5.3 million in surplus. Operating ratio is good, 1.61. Debt service coverage ratio, certainly better than 1.20, 1.85. Capital coverage ratio now on the other side of 1 at 1.17. And we'll have 208 days plus of cash on hand. We do not have any invested balances remaining in this fund. continuing the expense analysis. The total operating expenses in 2022 to 2021 budget will be up by $3.7 million. Inflation is a big chunk at $724,000. Spending volume will be 2.2 million, and $775,000 worth of capital items that must go into the operating side of the business. Looking at some adjustments to that real spending, the portion of the increase is due to depreciation and amortization of $285,000. So take that out of the picture. And our major maintenance has gone up $1.5 million. So that actually, yeah, $1.5 million. So we'll take that out of the picture, essentially leaving this with a unfavorable spending variance of $352,000, which really amounts to a 1.8% real spending increase.
Okay, the highlights of the 2022 capital budget, the largest single line item there you'll see is annual water main replacements. At $2.4 million, that represents 1 mile of main replacement per the renegotiated lease. Also, as Ed touched on, we have the PEDVEST project, the high lift VFD replacement project at the water plant. That's for the bulk of the construction, which due to equipment lead times, the bulk of the construction will occur in 2022 and conclude in 2022. So those are the two big items. The other stuff, we have some non-major capital items. We have indenture report improvements at the water plant. We have tank and reservoir rehab. We're starting a large diameter valve replacement project, just the design, feasibility study and design phase for that. And then various water system related studies. What that item is, that's for a master plan of the filtration plant, which is up next year. We have to do it because the last one was in 2017. And then wastewater, we also have indenture report improvements at Klein's Island. We shifted some priorities around based on some Act 537 issues, and the main pump station improvements. We shifted that to begin design phase next year, and also the 480 volt MCC replacement and intermediate pump station upgrade. We shifted that around a capital plan for that to commence design phase next year as well. And then next year we'll be finishing, I'm sorry, we'll be starting the boiler project construction and finishing that the following year. Also, you see a lot of money under Regional Act 537 projects there. That totals $2.67 million in Act 537 wet weather related work. So those are the highlights of the wastewater side.
Okay, so the major factors in terms of the lease amendment are approximately $3.2 million revenue increase in phase 2. I think we did talk about some of this last year, but inflation of 4.6% as a component of that. We obviously get additional water from the water purchase agreement of $750,000. We have baked into the numbers the payments required for healthcare, lease administration, impacted by the high inflation. On the spending side, I think we talked about spending increases on a volume basis of $352,000. Again, only 1.8% off to the 2021 budget. Debt considerations are the PEDVEST loan for $1.2 million. And if I saw that right, you're only going to spend 1.1, so we will borrow 1.2. And a slight increase in debt service in accordance with the refinance bond schedule that we went through in September of last year, not of last year. Yes. And debt service coverage, I believe that was the number we talked about last time. That should be 1.85. A lot of numbers.
I did forget to mention for city water, the filter upgrade project, we are starting design of that next year. So I neglected to mention there's a $200,000 line item under city water for the filter project upgrade design. And that's a near-term master plan project that's urgently needed.
Any board questions? Public questions? Jenny, did you have any comments on the proposed city budget?
No comment from Brian here.
Okay, Brian. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
All right, a little early to review. Thank you. Anything else?
So at our next meeting on the 11th of October, we'll focus on any major changes to what we've presented, any refinements. We'll do a detailed review of the suburban water rate proposal that we'll put together based on what we talked about today. And Jennifer Montero will be in attendance to present the Western Lehigh annual user charge report that has to go to the signatories. So that's what's next on tap for budget process. That's what we have for today.
Yeah, it was the completion of our first item.
Really appreciate your attention. That was a lot of numbers, a lot of detail, but
Thank you.
Good first step. Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is the, should be an easier one, LCA pension plan mandatory municipal obligation. Information is the gray documents we received in the board package. The digital board package is pages 8 and 9. It's great.
Okay, Ryan. So the minimum pension obligation is a function of, I'll call it W-2 payroll for the entire business. Costed at a 0.1205 rate from PMRS. And then the offset to that is the 0.01 or the 1% the employees pay. Essentially, all of this is designed to come up with a minimum obligation for the business of $1,610,000 some odd dollars in terms of money that we need to pay to PMRS to cover the 2022 expected costs and contributions. This is the calculations are the same as they have been over the years. They do require a bridge of the unfunded liability, which in this particular case is $475,000, and so that's part of the composition of the 1.6. And since we didn't get through the financial statements yet, in terms of, I'm sure you want to ask the question, how much is unfunded? Well, we are funded at 97.something%. So
Make the retirees happy. Question on the 4.160 million. I mean, $4,160 there. That based on 20, that would $20 per plan member. That would only be 208 plan members. So who else are we including in there? People that have retired but have not started collecting pension.
Retirees are members.
That's part of the total population.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
So this is something that we're required to present as an information item, no action required, just something we're required to present to you, unless there's any.
And they have been paid for this year, and this is destined to be paid in 2022, and our only deadline is by the end of the year, which we intend to pay well ahead.
Okay. Do we need to approve this? Okay, I'll go. All right, next on the agenda. Nothing under water. We have one item under wastewater, which is Suburban Division, Heidelberg Heights, 2021 and 2022 sanitary sewer replacement project. Construction phase authorization approval. Yellow sheets in our board package, digital pages 10 through 14.
Okay, that would be Jason and I. Jason, are you still awake?
Yes, I'm still here, Chuck.
Excellent, okay. I'll introduce the project. Heidelberg Heights, as you folks know, it's our system up in Heidelberg Township, our sewer and our water system. This deals with the sewer side. We have 145 customers up there. The system is from the late 70s. We acquired it in the late 90s. And we are operating under consent order and agreement imposed by DEP. And one of the conditions in the consent order is that we replace all the original clay, vitrified clay, sewer main and laterals up there. So this is our annual program to replace that old leaky sewer main and public side laterals. If you recall, in the spring, I presented a recommendation to reject the bids because we bid this year's project last spring and we received unfavorable results. The cost exceeded budget significantly and we were not happy with the fact that we only got 2 bids. So what we did is we repackaged the project, and to realize economy of scale, we added next year's project. So the project is split into 2 phases. And we got 5 bidders and we got decent prices and we're happy with the low bid price. It's within the budget amount. And so we're going to ask for approval of bid phase, of construction phase. And Jason's going to talk a little bit about what the project entails. So if you're still there, Jason, if you can explain what we're doing.
Sure, no problem, Chuck. Thank you, everybody, for having me on the phone here this afternoon. Like Chuck said, I'm here to talk a little bit about what the project entails for this year. Chuck had made mention that the project is going to be phased in two construction areas. Phase 1 will happen before the end of this year, and then phase 2 will begin next year and then be completed by sometime late spring of 2022. The first phase, which we're calling in the board memo here, is phase 4, is roughly 750 foot of sewer main and associated public portion laterals. Phase 5, which will be roughly 800 lineal feet of sewer main replacement and also associated public portion laterals. In there, we'll also be updating some of the manhole structures, putting frames and covers on, also treating the outside of the existing manholes with what's called a rapid seal. It's a wrap that's put around the outside of the manhole and then torched on, which creates a weather-tight barrier, preventing corrosion onto the existing structure, but also preventing the inflow and infiltration into the structure as well. With the completion of these 2 phases over the next little over a year, here just short of a year, we'll be roughly somewhere around that 85 to 90% mark of all the public infrastructure that's buried in the ground as far as the sewer mains and the public portion laterals will be taken care of by then. We have roughly a little bit about 1,000 foot left to be taken care of out on Heidelberg Heights Road. That'll come up here in the 2023 project year. If anybody has any questions, I can answer anybody that has any.
I'll just add. Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, I have a question on the bids you got. Kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, there's quite a spread between the low bidder and the number 2 bidder, as you noticed. I think the bids are indication of contractors are nervous about materials, about pricing, about inflation, about delivery times. Obviously, the low bidder was less nervous than the other ones, and he gave us a good price. But yeah, the other bids, the prices get outrageous.
Have we gotten references on this low bidder? Talked to other people who have used them?
Yes, I know some consultants they listed as references, and I checked them, and they've done satisfactory work on their projects. Although we have not worked with them previously.
cost escalations on the low-bidder case of raw material. Price of things went up 30%, that they're gonna come and get that away from us.
We do not have that clause in the specs. So they take that risk now. They might want to finish the entire project this year in view of that. And that's okay. They can do that. We're just doing 2 years worth of projects with one project here and meeting our obligation for this year. So we don't get in trouble with our consent order.
How many more phases do you anticipate for this?
Just one for this one. As Jason said, we'll have about 85% of all the public side replaced after the completion of this project. So then we're going to do one more main replacement project in 2023, and then we really have to look at the private side at rehab work on the private property where the leaks are coming in, whether it be by illegal connections or broken private side laterals, which right now this is just dealing with the stuff that we own.
And the package plan itself?
The plan is performing fine, but we do have occasionally bypasses there because of the high flows. So we're replacing all this main, but we're not seeing a proportional decrease in some of the wet weather flows. I mean, there's been an improvement, but we still suspect that a lot of water is coming in on the private side. So we're going to have to address that, and our implementation schedule, our corrective action plan requires us to do investigatory work there.
We have not done any smoke testing or any other kind of testing to see if the illegal discharge is going into our system.
Not yet, but we're going to embark on that program next year. And we were already, Jason and I were in discussion with the township supervisors, just putting them on notice that we're going to be getting into that in case they get some concerned residents showing up that might not understand that we run the system and the township really doesn't have anything to do with it.
Good boy, Bogues. Good boy.
Do we, is there an ordinance to allow us to do that or
Yes.
on the books already?
Yep, the township supervisors adopted a rules and regulations ordinance for the sewer system, and that was at our request.
Bogey get cut tomorrow.
And Brad, our former solicitor, Brad Landon, he was the author of that. He helped put that together. So it's in place. It gives us the authority to enforce the regulations and enforce the disconnection of illegal connection.
Okay, thank you. Board members, if you could please put your Zoom on mute, please. Thank you. Okay, any questions?
So I'm asking for the authorization to award the bid to Barrasso Excavating, and also I have attached a professional service authorization for full-time inspection services provided by Keystone Consulting Engineers.
Okay, so we need a motion for capital project authorization, construction phase, Suburban Division, Heidelberg Heights Sanitary Sewer Rehabilitation Phase 4 and 5. Construction phase, and that will include contract award to Barrasso Excavation for $498,630 and a professional services authorization $27,500 for construction inspection by Keystone Consulting Engineers. A motion and a second.
I make a motion.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Scott, seconded by Dick. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Waiting for unmute. Sorry. Ted, how about you?
Aye. Yes.
Thank you. Any opposed? All right, ayes have it. Hang on.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks, Jason.
Bye now.
Moving on to the monthly financial review. We haven't heard enough from Ed.
Always a pleasure.
Please share your presentation, Ed. This presentation was also posted to our website and emailed to the board in advance for those who aren't screen sharing today. Take it away.
Okay, so for August, for the month, income, kind of mixed bag there. Lots of money at suburban water, suburban wastewater, a little bit more. City division made up for it, so they carried the LCD total. Against forecast, unfavorable on water, unfavorable on wastewater. City was favorable, but it wasn't enough to carry us, so overall we're on the unfavorable side in terms of income. Cash flow. All three funds exhibited surpluses, so that's good. Actually, all three funds were better than forecast as well. So cash flows obviously performed better than income did. For the month, that DSCR is better on a year-to-date basis. So that's, yeah, looking at it on a monthly basis for it really is dependent on timing of debt service, and it's just very misleading. So, okay, on the income statement, year-to-date. Positive across all three funds, $5.6 million in total for LCA, a nice hefty number on the city side, as well as wastewater side too, and can't complain about water. They did finish a little bit off the forecast though on a year-to-date basis. Suburban water was off by 159, wastewater 154, city was good, so it's made it look a little bit better. Almost the same thing as the month, and on a year-to-date basis, the cash flows for all three funds are positive, and for all three funds, we're carrying a favorable variance to forecast as well. Debt service coverage is 1.5, that's all better than 1.20. A little bit off the forecast, not by much. Wastewater 10.06, down a little bit from the 10.38. But better than targeted. City division, well, with 1.93 versus 1.91. So that's good. So city had some really good numbers monthly year to date. Some of the major factors in terms of suburban water. Net income was on the negative side, so it was also lower than forecast. So we had a couple things offset. Revenues were higher, but operating expenses for labor and services more than offset that, slightly higher interest expense turned that all negative. In terms of cash flows, there was a surplus. We are better than forecast. So you got again a positive offset, a little bit lower net income offset by lower debt service and lower CapEx. Okay. Suburban wastewater, net income also negative, lower than forecast. In this particular case, operating revenues were lower, some lower residential and commercial user charges, some lower hauler fees, and tapping fees were also on the operating side. That made up for some of it, but not all of it. Actually, that should be lower operating expenses and lower labor charged in. I get carried away with that color sometimes. Cash flows, surplus side, better than forecast. Lower CapEx more than offset the lower net income. And on the city side, wow, all green. Good to see. Net income better than zero. We're also better than forecast. You got higher user charges, higher tapping fees, lower operating expenses coming from lower labor charged in. Cash flows on the positive side, so we had a surplus better than forecast. Higher net income helped from above, and also aided by lower CapEx. Okay, looking at where we are in terms of operating revenues. Pretty much right around forecast year to date on suburban water. We think we're going to finish better for the year on suburban wastewater. actually a little bit lower in suburban wastewater, not by much. We think we'll be a little bit better on revenue for the entire year. So that's good on the city side, better, slightly better. And we just talked about on user charges, and we think we're going to be a little bit below. And keep in mind, some of that is $500,000 worth of customer relief fund. Operating expenses. 7171 on suburban water. In terms of expenses, we think we'll finish at 11.0 versus 11.2. That's good. On suburban wastewater, 11.2 year to date so far, 11.1. I think labor was up a little bit, not by much, but some. We think we're going to finish at 19.4 versus 18.9. So again, we think we're going to finish with a little bit higher labor expenses for the entire year. City side, 15.5 versus 15.6. So good. And then on for the year, we think we'll be up 28.6 versus 27.8. And some of that is in major maintenance on the city side.
And the last two columns, you adjusted every quarter, is that correct?
We adjust every quarter. And so what you're seeing is what we had put in earlier, and we're tweaking it with the budget. We're trying to make it look a little bit better so that when we do Q4, we'll jive the budget.
So that's basically your snapshot 3
months.
3 months.
Yep.
The yellow bar, the left or the rightmost bar is the budget, so that never changes.
Which one doesn't change?
So that gold bar is a budget number. So that
budget number that you set up at the beginning of the year. Okay, thank you.
Yes, it's the gray one that is the forecast that we're talking about.
Okay.
Okay. CAPEX, 1.7 versus 1.7 year to date, a little bit lower, 3.6 versus 4.1. So we're going to be a little bit lower on a yearly forecast compared to budget. Suburban wastewater year to date, 2.1 versus 2.4 rounded. For the year, forecast would be 3.7 versus a budget of 3.9. And on the city side, 3.6 versus 3.4 year to date, and we'll finish 8.3 versus 8.9. This I kind of threw in actually, you know, when she had looked at this before, she's, what is this all? This is more what I look at in terms of a comparison forecast, and I have this set at a 5% range. So it's if it's plus 7%, it's no good, and if it's below 5%, it's no good. But this just kind of leads me to look at maybe some things that we need to tweak in terms of the way we're looking at forecasting, and it's more a problem thing. So here's some problem areas that you need to worry about as you continue to forecast. Okay. Year-to-date operating ratios, all good. 1.22 versus budget of 1.13 and a target of 1. As you get to suburban wastewater, 1.16 versus 1.06 versus 1. And city 1.93, 1.66 versus 1. And then yearly total LCA 1.52 versus 1.36 and 1. Wow, it's nice to see the leftmost bar on the higher side. Same thing on cash-based operating ratio, which is strip out depreciation. So we're good across the board in suburban water. We're also pretty good in across the board on suburban wastewater. And on the city side, 2.58 versus 2.1 or 1.15. So that's good. And LCA at 2.06 versus 1.76 and 1.2. So good. Debt service we kind of covered already. 1.5, 10.06, 1.93, all better than 1.2, and I believe that means they're all better than forecast and target and budget for the year. So, and cash on hand. 358, not 358 versus 224 and 176. And the city is right now just a little bit below target, but that 176 is a little higher than it's running for a long period of time. Forecast, the only thing noteworthy on the city side was the Q3 forecast includes, I'll call it a big chunk of non-cash expenses and interest. It's not in the net operating profit. So really that fund went negative as a result of some of the things that are on the interest expense side that are non-cash related. Accretion, changes in the service liability payable. So that's what's driving that. But on the net operating profit side, that's a positive number, and when compared to a budget, that's positive as well. So on the cash flow side, suburban water, we're on the negative side, but better than forecast. Wastewater is positive, it's better than forecast. And again, on the city side, the only reason that we're showing a negative variance to budget is we took the $2 million out of the borrowing for VFDs and kind of replaced that in 2022 with a slightly lower number. So otherwise, that fund would have been in pretty good shape too. So questions? Well, I went through that in a hurry.
Nice to see green.
City was really good this month. I mean, year to date income and cash flow, that was good to see.
Any questions on that?
So Ed, just the usual question, given where we are in the year, are we running behind on CapEx? Is that why CapEx is lower, or are projects coming in cheaper?
I would say that I'll let Chuck answer that. The numbers for me suggest that they're running a little bit behind. Now that's probably not, there's probably some effect on the city side with respect to the VFDs dropping out or flipping over to 2022, but he can answer water and wastewater because that's probably timing related.
Yeah, it's timing. It's certainly, things have certainly gotten no cheaper. So it's just timing for projects. Things have just been taking longer than usual due to supply chain issues. I keep hearing the same complaints from contractors. So I attribute it to primarily project timing.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on. The next item on our agenda is the monthly system operations overview. August report was attached. It's the digital board package 25/74, and it does include the white sheet that we have normally from John.
Very good. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see everybody in person again.
Yeah.
After several months. I'll be doing the August 2021 operations report. As you'll see in general, after a couple of more quieter months, August was a little busy. So there's quite a few different items here that we'll be discussing today. Just some basic comments on the operations report for August. You can see the monthly average of water flow production was over 23 MGD, which is way more than our daily averages in 21 or 22. That's typical summer extra flow of people watering grass, gardens, etc. Our feed from Allentown was almost 8 MGD to supplement the suburban wells, which hasn't been unusual for that lately, but it is high. You see the well production is 4¼ MGD. Precipitation totals, almost 8 inches of rain during August. See our 2021 totals have increased out of 30. So with a third of the year to go yet, we have plenty of time to, unfortunately, to get up to more some of the rainier year totals of 2021. Going down below, significant repairs and upgrades. This summer, we started rehabbing 2 of our concrete storage tanks on the Allentown system. One is the 16th ward, which is a 300,000 gallon unit, and the 19th ward, which is a 150,000 gallon reservoir built in 1958 and 1960 respectively. Both were totally taken off service, drained. They were blasted and cleaned on the inside. And as far as we can tell, that's the first time we did a full-scale internal remediation project on either of these tanks. The 16th ward tank is done, back online. The 19th ward will be finished soon and be back online. So we'll be happy when those two are projects are taken care of and out of the way. Description of NOVs and SSOs for the month. There were 2 bypasses, one SSO and 1 NOV for August. The NOV was for Wynwood wastewater treatment plant. I'll be talking about this in a minute. It's more detailed further along the packet. Heidelberg Heights wastewater treatment plant had 2 bypasses, one on the 19th and 20th of August, totaling 28,000 gallons, and resulted from a 2.1 inch rainfall. The second bypass was the 23rd to the 26th of August, totaling almost 250,000 gallons, resulting from a 3.4 inch rainfall. And that second rainfall event also caused an SSO when the equalization tank overflowed and approximately 110 gallons was released onto the ground. The NOV, if you flip to the next page, the NOV at Wynwood was issued on August 10th. Sent to Andrew Moore, our compliance manager. See that their focus on this NOV is for historical violations of the permit. The last either fecal or CBOD or ammonium nitrogen was in January of 2020. There were some other things that went on quite a few years ago as well. Since then, the new plant has come online, and as Andrew noted in his report on the next page, we have been able to keep in compliance with the new plant since it went back online. So hopefully that will continue. Andrew provided a very detailed response to all of their concerns and their noted violations. So it was well dealt with, and it just basically summarizing all the problems that we've had over the years. But like I said, now with the new plant, most of these violations are basically just historical, and hopefully we'll have much more of a successful nature with the new plant that is now online. Finally, we have the condition assessment report that we ran on the 30 and 36 inch coupled iron pipe transmission main in the city. This assessment was done in mid-December of 2020. We did over 2,600 feet of 36 inch DIP, and we did approximately 3,100 feet of 30 inch DIP. This is all class 50 pipe that was installed in or around 1983. I have summarized the sections down below as far as the recommendations of the report and the status of each. See the number 1 to 6. Perform a structural analysis, including finite element analysis on the 30 sections. That and several other things are planned for that particular pipe later in Q4 of 2021. Perform transient pressure monitoring for at least 30 days. We did pressure testing and monitoring 17th and Elm for 30 days this past summer. Average pressure was 92 psi, maximum pressure was 95 psi. And if you look in the pure report, their calculated surge pressure for the basis of risk of damage, breakage, whatever you want to call it, was 130 psi. So we had seen no pressures in that remote area that were even close to the pressures that were going to be required to cause any problems based on what they found during the survey. Perform an acoustic leak survey while the pipes were online. We did that February of 2021. This year earlier we did a leak survey from Union and 17th all the way up to Huckleberry Ridge. We will be doing that one again probably within the next couple of months to even early next year. Results were fine. We didn't find anything out of the ordinary with the survey that we had done on the line running north to the ridge. Perform a further evaluation of the identified sections of 30-inch DIP because of the close proximity. This is also planned for Q4 of this year. Excavate some or all the identified sections and verify pipe loss, collect soil samples for erosivity. We plan on this again later this fall. Number 6, perform another electromagnetic inspection in 5 years. We note this, and the timing on this will be subject to change depending on if our findings are worse than the original assessment report indicate. We will probably do that inspection less than 5 years. If the results are better than we anticipate, we might be advised by our consultant to be able to stretch that out to more than 5 years. The report itself, if you're into strength materials and all that good stuff, it's a good read. Otherwise, not so much. There's good detail on this about where the pipe was done, where the project was done, their results, their techniques, their analyses, and I'm not a structural engineer, so I can try to answer your questions as best as I can. But I think the report is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, I can answer basic questions should you have any. But again, the full report is here. I summed up the conclusions and recommendations down into a few lines. If there are any questions, I would be happy to attempt to answer.
Questions. Corrosion is happening from outside or from inside?
Outside, going in.
So when we had the breakage in Walford and Sunbury, so we sent a sample to the Sunbury, Texas, and they were supposed to analyze and see if the environment the outside was impacting the exposure. Right. So that was over a year and a half ago, right? So have we got a conclusion whether the soil surrounding that pipe has caused corrosion or those other factors?
Remember, we only did that at that one section. So
I understand that.
It's really kind of different from these.
Yes.
Did we get a report? I don't remember. Either way, I'll research if we did and be able to discuss the results of the next meeting.
We did, and it was actually that report that caused us to do this study.
Okay.
So we would understand, we did the spot check in that particular area, and then we did this larger study to get the whole condition.
Because the area which is impacted by the loss of thickness is only 12 or 13 square inches in the area. So it's not, there are a lot of small areas. So, I'm trying to figure out in my head, as a material scientist, why it is here and not, not continuous, right?
They're going to be looking at certain things. If you notice, the 30-inch line was all the 5 anomalies were within a couple hundred feet.
Yes.
Where the 2 on 36 were very spread apart. So they're going to be looking at soil conditions. They're going to be looking at if there's any kind of stray current, subsurface, things that might be adding to the external corrosion pipe. That may or not have been indicated at the 17th and June, where the last main break was, and the first one was at 17th. And whether or not those conditions exist at the other sites, I mean, again, that's going to be something that the research and follow-up work will show us.
So also the focus on these 2 lengths of pipe were because of the material and the installation date, versus I'm sure there's other 36 and 30-inch lines throughout the system in Allentown.
There is, and this is all class 50, which is I believe class 52 was the standard then. Why they use 50, I don't know, but that was part of their analysis too. Was the thickness, the typical thickness was the variability between pipes themselves. I mean, that was all taken into account with this report.
Does this indicate that we should do this in any other sections of pipe throughout the city?
That is a question yet to be answered. We didn't ask for that. We were really focused on where we knew the problems were. And again, I'll check on that with our consultant and see what they say. They haven't said anything up to now about that, so I'm kind of assuming not, but I'll verify that.
We had two problems. One was at 17th and Sumner, and one was at 17th and Walnut, right? So those were the two major breaks that we had.
17th and Chew. By the high school. Between the high school and the hospital.
I think, Brian, it's essential that we have enough data points which shows that you have corrosion. It's understanding the cause of the corrosion, and understand the cause of corrosion, then it would determine whether you have to go, through the electromagnetic technology to measure the thickness and either other program that you have to put in place. But till not knowing what is causing that, maybe it would be premature to go to other area to measure the thickness of the wall. At least that would be my view.
Sure. Okay.
Hey, John, it's Jeff. I had a couple of questions for you. And maybe you said this and I didn't hear it, but in the report, it said there, I believe, like 328 pipe segments that were inspected. And there were 7 segments that were identified with issues. Do you know if those were all in the same location, like they were 5 pipe segments that were, jointed together, or was this just all random as part of the study?
Are you asking if they were joint corrosion spots or?
No. So for example, it said there were 5 30-inch pipe segments that had corrosion.
Yes.
So were those all together? Or were they just randomly found in all of the pipe segments that were inspected?
Yeah, they were all randomly, but coincidentally on the 30-inch pipe, all 5 of them were found within 252 feet of each other.
Okay. So that
quite a bit of, we did 3,100 feet of inspection and we only came out with 252 feet of bad results. Where on the 36-inch line, we only found 2 and they were separated by almost 2,000 feet. So it would either make you think there's very different soil conditions or just local conditions for the 36-inch line, but why would all the 30-inch anomalies be together? That's what we're going to be looking at this fall. There's something going on locally or whatever, that maybe some kind of systematic problem that we have to have.
Right. That's what I was getting at. So I don't know if there's been any discussion. It might be a little premature, but even in the 30-inch pipe, it's not easy, but that can be lined actually. And I don't know if that's something you guys are thinking about down the road, or some discussion to have with the engineer that's working on this, if it's in close proximity. So just a thought for you.
We really haven't talked about remediation yet. We're still trying to focus in on what caused the problem in the first place. So once we find out this additional information this fall yet, then we'll start looking at what the actual remediation is going to be.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
John, have it shared with you what is the accuracy of electromagnetic inspections? I mean, is it 90-95% or?
I would love to be able to answer that.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. I'm just trying to see how much is variabilities to the fact of.
But that brings up a very good counterpoint, and that's why we're actually going to be doing digs this fall to verify everything that there's found.
Correct.
So obviously it's not 100%. There's all kinds of different, soil results and whatever else. So we're going to actually dig and repeat some of their findings right on the spot. So
thank you, Jim.
I may have missed something. I surely have. But do you inspect the pipe before it's installed?
Inspect it like it's while it's being installed?
Are you sure you're getting what you're asking?
I believe Jason would be the guy to answer this, Jason Brewer, but I believe once the pipe gets installed, they would do a CCTV or a leak inspection of some sort before it goes online. So there's supposed to be inspectors there to see if the pipe is actually what it's supposed to be. all the valves, all the fittings, everything is supposed to be inspected. So, I mean, it's not like we're leaving the contractors out to do things without us being right. Is that
Yeah,
right?
I can add to that for you, John. Typically, water system, the new pipe is installed and it's pressure tested at 1.5 times the operating pressure. And it usually has to hold that for 4 hours, make sure there's no leaks. That's just one standard item. And as you said, you normally have an inspector there and looks at the pipe and everything before it's put in the ground to make sure there's no damage or anything like that.
Thanks, Jeff.
Maybe Chuck.
Yeah, but we do that for our main replacement projects. We have full-time inspection and there's a pressure test before the pipe is accepted, before the services are connected. There's a pressure test that's run. So we do inspect every stick of pipe that goes in the ground.
Any other board questions? Questions on the
Ted here has a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, where is the company that did the inspection? Where are they from?
The report is titled, Branchburg, New Jersey.
Yeah, at some point here, depending on where this goes, maybe it's worthwhile getting them to one of our board meetings.
Another option would be to have Gannett Fleming attend. Gannett Fleming is our water consultant who helps us with pipeline prioritization for our main replacements. And Gannett Fleming actually shepherded the project through with the consultant who did the inline inspection.
Okay, whatever, just in case we want to hear this all firsthand, you know.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I was asking if there are any questions on the NOV as well. That's the fight report. Okay. Thank you very much. Move on now to staff comments. You've indicated this is one that you have.
Yeah, I just have one brief one. I wanted to make the board aware that the county of Lehigh had reached out asking if LCA would host a ballot box in our lobby. So we're working with them to look at security and how that might work. But the ballot box locations have to be spread out throughout the county, and they're looking for public buildings where they could do that. So that the time period when the ballot box would be in our lobby is from October 18th through November 2nd. So just a little over 2 weeks for that. So just wanted to make you aware.
Another public service.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Solicitor comments.
No comments.
Any public comments on any items? Okay, hearing none. We have no executive session, so we are adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.